welcome back down to the woods. It's getting on towards the end of April now. Beautiful spring day, complete contrast to yesterday, which just felt like February, or if you're in Cornwall, July. Strong wind, heavy rain, bitterly cold, whereas today it's still balmy, the birds are singing, it's absolutely lovely. So I wanted to just have a little sit and ponder. We're kind of in that interregnum bit now. We've done much of the clearing work as we can do. Obviously we're going to have a respite now, let the birds breed. I think we'll have a look as we go through, but I think we've got a robin nesting in our nesting box, our little bass nesting box, so hopefully they'll fledge some young and we'll be able to keep an eye on them. So it's kind of that quiet bit, letting everything do its thing. You can see the woods behind me there. Within a couple of weeks they'll be absolutely thick with bluebells, and obviously we'll try and keep our work down to a minimum, let the bluebells flower and do their thing, but then it'll be all hands to the pump as we come in. Our poults are due to arrive probably first, second week of August. We've gathered in all the equipment, getting it ready for a good wash and a clean. As you can see, all the feeders behind us. But there's a few bits I've been doing, really just pottering around. But you may have heard me on the Guns on Pegs podcast talking about some work done by Joe Madden down at Exeter University, looking at the survivability of young chicks in rearing. And we were thinking about how that might apply to young poults in the pen. Well, I've fished out some of the hazel posts that we cut back end of last year. Started building some perches for them, and I think doing that's what we're going to concentrate on for the next couple of weeks, kind of turning the pen into a bit of a jungle gym. I remember listening to Peter Bailey up at Branches talking about how to hold pheasants. It's one of those things that we all sweat bullets over. Are the birds going to like where they are? Are they going to hang around? Or are they going to disappear over the hill? And last year, with some of the things we tried, we seemed to do a lot better than previous years. And as Peter was saying, it doesn't matter how many birds you have down. If they don't like the hotel, they won't hang around. So we've done a lot of work again this year, trying to improve on what we did last year. We've fortunately had a few trees come down in the wind. There was a dangerous sycamore that had been snapped off by one of the falling oaks that we've managed to bring down the main trunk safely. So that's all now added to a lot of the cover in the pen. We've carried on pleaching over the hazels and doing a bit of coppicing and a bit of pollarding with those, so that should improve the ground cover. And just where that light is coming in, we're seeing a hell of a lot more species of ground plant grow down at the herbaceous level, and the bramble now is second year in, so that's starting to give us some good cover. If I turn around, look behind me, so the bramble back behind me there, that was an area we cleared 3 years ago, and it's producing now a really good thicket, some really good cover. The birds like getting in under that. We're going to look at the feeding regimen for the birds this year. I'm seriously considering whether it's worth putting a little mealworm farm at home. I'm not quite sure how Claire would take to that. Maybe if I keep it in the shed and don't tell her, it'll be fine. But I'm quite keen to make sure that the birds, when they do arrive, are given a head start in terms of the feed they're getting. Good variety of feed, not just simply pellet. I know we had the micronized maize, the cornflakes, just whistle and hand fed last year, worked extremely well. We've got the main ride up through that we strawed last year to good effect. And once the bluebells have cleared there, it's good to see that after the strawing last year, the bluebells have come back through that thicker than ever, so it's clearly not causing them any problems. And we've been doing quite a bit of dead hedging, added to a few of the dead hedges in the pen, but we've put a big area down in the flush point. We've had the team come in and pick out some of the little wild seeded hollies and hawthorns and pretty much whatever we can find. and just added those in, see if they'll slowly grow through. We've taken some of the willow whips from down on the wetter edge there and just taken those and just poked them in. Quite a few of those haven't really done much, but one or two look like they may sprout, may take. And the key aim there is to just try and populate the bottoms of the hedges and get some thickness in there and provide some windbreak, but most importantly provide some habitat for the wild birds that are in the woods here, and potentially for any of our pheasant that survive the harvest and survive the winter. We've seen quite a few hen birds around. There's a few in the woods here. A couple of cockbirds have gone back into the pen, which may cause us problems when the poults arrive, but we'll deal with that. But it would be fantastic to know that we've created some suitable habitat for some of the pheasant to breed wild, and possibly add some wild birds into the potential harvest for next year. We've kept an eye on predators. We're getting on top of the foxes again. We do have a badger set over on the far side of the wood here. Obviously nothing we can do about that, and luckily it's right at the far end of the wood, so it's a long way away from the pen. But I'm considering moving the squirrel feeders maybe over to the other wood, because obviously any dropped peanuts will attract the badgers towards the pen, and we want to try and avoid that where we can. The only other things I've done so far is we've closed the pen back up again. We've made some rudimentary checks on the fences. I think once the bluebells are done, we'll come out and strim under the electric fence, and we'll probably get that turned back on again. I've noticed from some ground marks in the pen itself, we've clearly got some rabbit action in there. Possibly a couple of deer have gone in and out, so we'll run the dogs through as soon as the bluebells are done as a preliminary measure, just to make sure we haven't got any resident deer in there. I'd be surprised if there were, because the pen's been closed up now for a few days, and it's only about 500 metres round, so I'm pretty sure if there was a roe in there it would be quite keen to get out. And then we've got the unenviable task of the couple of trees that came down through the fence on the other side. We've got a couple of people with their felling licence and chainsaw tickets who are going to take a serious look at those, because the stresses on those big fallen trees, there's a big oak and a big sycamore shattered across it. It's not for the amateur to have a go at. We really need somebody who knows what they're doing to assess it properly and make sure that we don't have any mishaps there. But obviously we need those out so we can get the fence secured again. And on from there, as soon as the bluebells are done, we'll get back in, start setting out feeders, start getting ready to accept the new birds, and then feeding duties and welfare maintenance begins. So quite often people who don't do what we do will ask us why we do it. I think often they've heard the stereotype of privileged upper class twits rushing around the countryside murdering wildlife, and quite often you'll see people who really don't have any experience of these sort of outdoor pursuits tarring us as cruel, bloodthirsty, mindless animals, which is peculiar in a way. And I think in some ways it is perhaps an oxymoron that, you know, we spend a lot of our spare time, a lot of resources trying to maintain these little islands. A lot of effort and a lot of time goes into it. Not just the physical work of trying to keep on top of the growth down here in the woods and in the surrounding areas, but also the time in doing study and looking into what's been done before, current thinking, what works, and also trying to get an idea of what a good outcome looks like. And when you really break it down, I mean, for us on our modest little DIY shoot, between 10 of us and friends and guests, if we can go home with 10 pheasant each for the table over the whole season, then we consider we've done pretty well on the harvest. So from a purely getting older protein point of view, practically it makes no sense. But I often think it's days like these, we're getting into late spring, the first growth has started to come through. I mean, I know from my experience, just spending quite an hour or two down in these little woodlands now compared to what it was like when Claire and I first came down probably 5 or 6 years ago. The difference is quite profound, quite dramatic. And I've just been sat here with my little Merlin app listening to the bird song, and already we've got blackbirds, chiff-chaffs, blue tits, wrens, robins, coal tits, blackcaps, song thrush, goldfinch and great tits. I know we've seen tree creepers and nuthatches. We get some jays in the woods, and there are coal tits and marsh tits, to name but a few. And these are pretty much our residents and a few of the spring arrivals. We get some summer visitors that'll come later. But right now the whole place feels alive. Like I said earlier, the celandines are flowering everywhere. The bluebells will be next. We're starting to see some campions come through. There are some patches of foxglove. And we're starting to see more and more butterflies. And they should start to come soon. And it won't be long before we roll into May. Spring will be in full effect as we start moving on to early summer. The bigger trees, the oak and the ash and the chestnut, will be coming into leaf. The oak have made a good start this year. The ash, sadly, most of the bigger ash here are showing signs of dieback, and every winter we lose a few more. But as we thin out the hazel underneath, we're picking out a few good looking trees. We've got some oaks, there are a few mountain ash, there are some birch, there are some nice hawthorn. We're giving them a bit of space to try and take over some of these gaps. And we're trying to manage this woodland. It just seems to be the common view these days that nature will do its thing, and in many ways it will, but it takes generations. In the short term, all we see is one species will find a little foothold, find a little niche and take over. And I think it's one of the misnomers that nature is harmony and balance. I don't believe it is. I think nature is greedy individually. Any species that finds a little niche it can exploit, it'll exploit it to the absolute fullest, and often it'll exploit that niche to exhaustion, and then it'll fail and another species will find a niche, and on it goes. And I think it's only after decades, centuries, maybe even thousands of years that those little wild spaces we all think we see would potentially establish. And good or bad. I mean, like this woodland, this isn't natural ancient woodland. This would have been planted, bit of chestnut, bit of oak, bit of ash. It could have been planted historically as a home for reared pheasants. More likely it was a source of firewood and building timber for the farm. And this little 10 acres has pretty much, till we came along in the last couple of years, been left to its own devices. And it tells, you know. It was a two-dimensional woodland, mature trees and low-lying vegetation, and any gap that came was immediately filled within a year or two by aggressive hazel, not allowing anything else to come through. So without that management we've been able to provide here, this woodland was slowly dying. The species count was almost non-existent, and even our mollycoddled hand-reared pheasants didn't like it, they wouldn't stay. Whereas last year, and hopefully this year, the works we're doing, we're bringing structure back into the woods. We're observing it, we're managing it. It's not aggressive management. It can't be. We don't have the manpower or the machinery or even the desire. We don't want to clear fell this. This isn't commercial. We don't even really want to aggressively manage the predators and the pest species, but in our own little way we want to try and find a balance that produces a healthy diversity, a range of different species, a place where different birds and plants and animals can thrive, but not a place where a single species takes hold and takes over. And I think in my own little way, I get very alarmed when I see prescriptive ideas from people, some with good experience, some with alternative agendas, basically decrying and poo-pooing and even demonising what we're doing here, with the view that their ideas are best and that only their views have a place in the thinking of how we manage our habitats and how we provide that much vaunted and much talked about diversity in the countryside. And I fear too many of these people are doing it for different agendas. Quite a lot of them are doing it for the money and the prestige, to be attached to one of these high profile projects often just gives them the impetus to move on and be attached to the next high profile project. And the fear is that once the money runs out, once the media circus moves on to something else, what happens to those environments then? I mean, this small farm in southeast Cornwall has probably maintained some kind of sporting life, shooting, fishing, possibly a bit of deer stalking for at least 100 years, and certainly with a third club to take on the mantle in the last 60 years. And without interference, we hope we'll be doing it for another 60 to 100 years. So on top of the money, the time and the effort we put in, the enjoyment we get from the camaraderie and the harvesting and the showing off the skills and lack of skills on a shoot day, a lot of what we do it for is just the enjoyment of seeing the benefit of our efforts as the seasons change, the excitement of spotting birds nesting, seeing or hearing species we haven't seen here before. And our commitment, if we're allowed to, is to be here for the next decade, next generation, the next 100 years, and continue to do this. I'll be keeping some records of just how many hours we spend unpaid, unsupervised, uncoached, unthanked. And since the spring, we've already surpassed 200 working hours down here, and we've only just begun. So my feeling is that I wouldn't be surprised at all if by the time we've concluded this season, with all the different aspects of what we have to do and our responsibilities, not only to our birds but to the wider habitat, there'll be well in excess of 1,000 hours of time spent predominantly in this small little patch of Cornwall. And I think when that's replicated across the country, that's a huge amount of time that's going into habitat management, it's going into the diversification, it's going into supporting wildlife and wild spaces that's overlooked or not recorded or not considered. And it worries me that it's too easy to take a view that one aspect of what we do is currently unpalatable. And because that is easy to single out and with an almost knee-jerk reaction just say can't kill animals without really understanding the broader implications or even the historical reasons why some of these actions are necessary, and an understanding why some of these actions are pleasurable. It goes back to our very evolution. We are hunters. But the ease with which all the other work we do, all the other benefits we bring, the custodianship and the guardianship of these areas, even just the interest in these areas to keep them present, is overlooked or ignored. And sadly, it's a bit of human nature that very few people are completely selfless. I speak for myself here, but I'm sure many of us would agree. If I had access to these woodlands in the way I'm fortunate to now, but there wasn't an outcome, there wasn't the opportunity to gather as friends and spend time, pit our wits against the wild creatures and attempt to harvest some wild food and wild meat for the table, would I spend so much of my own time and effort down here? Would I be as concerned? Would I be as interested? And I have to say honestly, probably not. And I think that's borne out by the hundreds of patches of scrub and woodland and bits of road verge and canal bank and river bank and rough patches in the corner of farmland that doesn't have a little local shoot or similar to attract people to it, and nobody goes there. So I think we need to step out from behind our fear of having the finger pointed at us, or the quick, easy response that hunting is cruel or shooting is barbaric or all animals are sacred, or many of these other ideas that everything should be pickled in aspic and preserved and nature will find a way. We need to stand up and say, no, that isn't the way it works. That isn't how things happen. And to look at it as more of a social contract, if you will. And to be able to say to people straight, we will look after these wild spaces. We will give it our best efforts and our best endeavours and the best of our resources to create and maintain a balance, to encourage diversity within those wild spaces, to monitor the health of those spaces and the animals and plants and invertebrates that live in them, and to undertake actions necessary to maintain that balance, whether that be reduction in the numbers of pests and predators, to be observant of illness and disease that may affect different species from time to time, to hold back aggressive or potentially invasive species that may be taking excessive resource from that space. To be custodians of these wild spaces, but the price, if you will, for doing that is to be allowed some respect for that, and to be allowed to take a harvest from all of our hard work, all of our investment in time and money and effort, and to continue not just a tradition, but to continue a way of life. A respect for wild places and wild creatures. And we ask for an understanding that whilst it's not what everybody wants to do, it's what we want to do. It's what I want to do. It's what the generations that come after me, I want them to have the opportunity to be able to do it. And not to have it removed because it's icky, because people don't want to face up to it. People don't want to think about the broader implications. And to have a situation where very quickly, if what we do isn't done, that either these places disappear, or they fall into ruin, or they change in such a way that they're unrecognisable to how they are now. Or that we pay for it. I said earlier, I think 1,000 hours of work is what we do here, just in these few acres. And I'm sure if somebody was to pay, potentially somebody would come and replace us and do what we're doing. But who's going to pay? And how are they going to pay? Will we see a wildlife tax? Will we end up with armies of people being paid by the state to come in and follow these mantras? In many ways we're almost there. A lot of the carbon offset rewilding is being done and paid for by our tax money through government grants and government payments, credits against tax for big corporates. There's a reduction in tax for wealthy individuals. A lot of the charities who are doing this work, giddily planting trees, rewilding areas, buying up farms and turning them back to nature. They're spending money that's been given to them by well-minded and good-meaning donors. I just hope that there is some kind of long-term plan for these spaces. And I hope that we don't see a return to a crisis requirement to rely on our own food again, because the money it's taken to take these areas of land out of food production pales into insignificance to the money that's going to be required to bring them back into food production, should we need them. So I don't think either side is entirely right or entirely wrong, but I think there has to be room for both. I think a brave government, take an example, the grouse wars. I've only ever been to one once. It's not in my budget to do so probably ever again, but whatever your feelings over the shooting of grouse, put that to one side. By any measure, the grouse moors are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the few open heather habitats in the world. They're a stronghold of the red grouse, one of the biggest strongholds in the world. The management has been proven to reduce out of control wildfires, and whilst historically predator control has been overzealous, and I for one would certainly not want to return to the old days of nothing but pheasants or nothing but grouse, and I don't think really there are any modern keepers who feel that way either. And I think most of the owners have a slightly different mindset. The sport has moved on, and they're not looking for shooting without responsibility. So many of these moors are now being bought up by other companies, and an idea might be to say, well, can we take two estates side by side, put a 25-year moratorium on it, and say we'll grow carbon credits on one, and we'll traditionally manage it as a grouse moor on the other, and by some agreed set of metrics, whether it be species diversity, sequestered carbon, I don't know, cost of management and maintenance even, over a period of time, be able to go back to that and decide who was right and who was not so right. Because I fear there's a lot of dogma tied up in what's happening at the moment, almost a class war attitude. And it's always rather worrying when a group of people stridently claim that they know best and won't seek any compromise. It does seem to be a bit of a flavour of the world at the moment that people are diametrically opposed. If you're not for me, you're against me. And that can never truly be a way to solve a problem. There always has to be a middle ground. There always has to be some give and take. But anyway, that's been very cathartic, just sitting here and having a quiet rant. I don't know how much of this might make the final edit, maybe none of it, but any that does, thanks for bearing with me. Be very interested to know your thoughts on this. Perhaps we could have a discussion about what you're doing, any ideas you've had. What are your thoughts to the future of what we do, positive and negative? And maybe how we can all, as a group, come together and positively tell people why, despite what they think, we love what we do, the benefits of what we do are clear and demonstrable and benefit everybody, and how we should be encouraged, not allowed, encouraged to continue and to take guidance as to how best to do it, and allow us to continue taking our wild harvest in return for all the effort and hard work we put in to the broader surrounds. Right, I'll shut up now.